the reporter who's been breaking basically all of the news from either the White House or out of the Knesset or out of Netanyahu's camp, Barak Ravid, over at Axios, is the receptacle for all the leaks from both sides, has a news story that is kind of reshaping the politics of Palestine. We put his piece up here. So basically what happened is over the weekend, the U.S. finally sent a sternly worded letter to Israel, which then it appears quite clearly that Israel then leaked to Barak Ravid. I want to read some of this just so people can get a flavor for it. They write, the humanitarian situation for over 2 million civilians in Gaza is increasingly dire. This is supposed to be a private letter. Despite the July transition from combat operations to special counterterrorism operations in the Gaza Strip, multiple evacuation orders have forced 1.7 million people into a narrow coastal zone from Mawasi to Deir Bala. Extreme overcrowding has put these civilians at high risk of lethal contagion. Humanitarian implementers report they are unable to meet essential survival needs of aid-dependent civilians. Trucks carrying humanitarian commodities, including perishable goods funded by the United States, are delayed at crossing platforms. I would encourage people to go and read this entire letter. It reads like some type of left-wing screed that you would find me penning somewhere. But it is just fact after fact after fact that says that, and it says that September was the worst month on record since this assault began a year ago for humanitarian aid getting in. And we also know that October has been worse than September. The situation is completely out of control. And they highlight the plight of 400,000 people. So you're talking 1.7 million people tucked into this little tiny enclave. They highlight the plight of 400,000 people in North Gaza that the IDF is ordering to leave North Gaza or be considered combatants, and has completely cut off from water and humanitarian aid, and starving them to death. And the U.S. is saying, you can't do this. Like, there is no military justification for this. And these 400,000 people, most of them are refusing to leave. First of all, and we have some reporting on this at Dropsite, people who do try to leave are then shot at, many of them killed. But many others are saying, we're not leaving because we have been through this rodeo. We do not believe that there is anywhere else in Gaza to go that is safe. So we're stuck here. This is part of, and we can put up this next tweet, which is kind of a summary from the Israeli perspective of what's been going on lately. So this letter comes at the same time, and so if you're listening to this, this is somebody who's doing a rundown. It says a rundown of kind of the international pressure Israel is under. One, Italian Prime Minister it says that they're no longer supplying Israel with any weapons. Germany is refusing to supply weapons since March 2024. Some of this is like slightly exaggeration, but this is the way it feels from the Israeli perspective. United Kingdom canceled around 30 licenses to supply weapons. 4, France and Spain advocate for full weapon embargo. 5, Canada suspended 30 permits for arms sales. And then 6 is this latest, USA threatens to halt weapons supply amid its fight with Hezbollah. And then they quote, allies with ironclad support, unquote. Israel will prevail with or without you. So on the one hand, from the left, we see this letter going to Israel as, what took you so long? Is a year in, you're not serious. You're not actually going to do any of this. From Israel's perspective, they see themselves completely isolated. The left-wing perspective, or not it's not the left wing, it's my perspective. The question of what took you so long made up most of the press briefing, like at the
that's
State
the question,
Department.
is how real is this? And also, if you put a month deadline, that's after the election, right? Because we're 20-some days to the election.
Yes.
So reality is you're not doing anything until after the election. That seems to be key.
Right, and what that thing is, I think is starting to become clear. But your question is the one that everybody who read this letter immediately asked, which, what took you so long? And this was also asked of Matt Miller. We can roll this from the State Department.
The Foreign Assistance Act says when it's made known to the president that the government of such country prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport of delivery of United States humanitarian assistance. It does not have arbitrarily. So given you are already saying humanitarian assistance is very low and putting in front of Israel a bunch of concrete measures on how to improve it, why are you waiting for another 30 days to implement the law?
Because we believe it's appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem. And international humanitarian law does make exceptions for certain, I'll give you an example. Dual use items is a good example. If there are dual use items that legitimately could be used as a military purpose, of course, governments aren't required to let those dual use items in, which is not to say that they can use that exception as a blanket restriction on anything that could be used as a dual use item.
So there was a lot of talking around in circles at the press briefing, which combined like some stern words like, yes, like right now, Israel, we do believe is in violation of 620I, this thing that says you can't send military aid to a country that is blocking U.S. humanitarian aid at the same. But they say, wait, we want to give them a moment to cure this. The context for this, like you said, is, okay, 30 days is after the election. What's going to happen after the election? Yep. And I think we're starting to see that. So control room, sorry, we'll skip me for now. I had a couple questions that I think are interesting, but are not exactly on this particular topic. Let's finish this topic first. If we could jump to D5, this is Senator Lindsey Graham talking about a quote unquote day after plan that is starting to be developed kind of absent the Palestinians between the US, the Israelis, and some of their Gulf partners over there. And I think you're going to start to see this come into focus. Go ahead.
Now's the time, if you're ever going to do it, to start a dialogue with Saudi Arabia about the day after.
Right, but the Saudis have also been very clear that what they want in return, that there needs to be a viable, sovereign, independent Palestinian state which the Israelis recognize.
They want two things. For them to recognize the state of Israel, they want a defense agreement with the United States. Saudi Arabia and the United States would have a mutual defense agreement like we have with Japan and Australia. In other words, the United States would go to war for Saudi Arabia. That requires 67 votes in the U.S. Senate. Senator Blumenthal is a Democrat trying to get the votes. I told MBS a year and a half ago, that will be a heavy lift, but I will try.
But the Israelis also have to want to recognize an independent Palestinian state. They're not going to do that.
An independent sovereign nation called Palestine, with security guarantees for Israel to make sure there's no future October 7th. It will be more like an emirate than it will be a democracy. MBS and MBZ at the UAE will come in and rebuild Gaza. They will reform the PA. They will create an enclave in the Palestine that can live in peace and harmony with Israel. They will stop teaching their children to kill the Jews. A de-radicalized, a demilitarized.
Is that actually true? Is that how they teach it?
Yes, literally.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, so the key phrase there is from Graham, if you pick this up, was, quote, called Palestine. So this morning, Barak Ravid had another piece, and this goes into the context of what we're talking about here. Basically, Ron Dermer, who is Netanyahu's top aide, and some top officials over at the UAE met with Antony Blinken and presented him with the proposal that you basically just heard Lindsey Graham lay out. Lindsey Graham's was about a week ago. This is putting it down in paper form. And what they asked Blinken to do was perhaps after the election to present it as a U.S. plan, that the U.S. has decided that this is the way to go forward. And the plan sidesteps the idea of Palestinian statehood because, as the report lays out, Netanyahu is stridently opposed to any mention of a two-state solution. That any idea that Palestinians would get any version of statehood in this plan is something that Netanyahu rejects. Yet he is still working with the UAE on moving forward with this plan. And so that's where it goes back to Lindsey Graham's idea of quote unquote called Palestine. So what that means basically, as he said, it would be an emirate. So it would be something
under the UAE? Is that?
So basically the US, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, who knows who else, would get in, and they'd say, okay, we're getting rid of Abbas, like we're getting rid of because Israel doesn't even approve of the Palestinian Authority being involved in this, and they will create some other mechanism that they will call independent. They will call Palestine, and the UAE and Saudi Arabia will offer the security guarantees, and then they'll offer the funding. The U.S. will fund it as well, and Israel will then have to withdraw. But it will not be remotely sovereign, and it will.
But who will be the sovereign? UAE.
Well, the whole thing's fake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's I think right. What I'm just trying to get at.
So basically, the way for Israel to agree to it was that it would have to have no real sovereignty. But it would have to be called sovereign somehow.
Look, this is nation building at its absolute worst. Trying to impose. First of all, I've lived in the Gulf.
And notice what we haven't talked about here.
Yeah,
Palestinians.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. I've lived in the Gulf. The Gulf, they don't care about Palestine. Okay, no. The leaders themselves, they don't care at all. Period. They gave up a long time ago. They wouldn't even open their mouths.
They hate that they have to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The actual people there who live, they definitely do. But the actual leadership, they care less. They just want to be rich, live in London. That's all they care about. But so this is like a thorny problem for them. For them to, if you have to consider this, to impose like the rule from the UAE onto people of whom they have like no relation to. Both, they may speak the same language, that's about it. Who they frankly like disdain and already look down upon. That's a recipe for disaster. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to have massive insurgency. You're going to have like the funding for it. It will be like Afghanistan 2.0 in terms of trying to impose this like fake form of government with allies and partners and all of this other onto. And if you were Hamas, like why would you even accept that? You would just fight against now this new insurgency. The only thing this would do is bail out Israel because they're the ones who don't want to be the occupying
and Israel
power.
Won't even accept this,
right?
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And what's so delusional about it is that they still have this idea that it's the textbooks that's creating like the hostility and the conflict. Every school in Gaza has been destroyed by Israel's assault on Gaza. You're talking about textbooks? They're blowing up all of the schools. If you talk to Palestinians who live in Gaza and ask them about the textbooks, someone will say, yeah, there actually is some like cringeworthy stuff in there that should be like edited out. But the idea that the resentment of Jewish Israelis comes from the textbooks ignores the fact that they've been getting bombed for a year and starved to death, and pushed into an enclave where like infectious disease is like spreading out of control. Like the material conditions are creating the resentment. And if you print a new textbook that is filled with propaganda about the virtues of the Israeli state, you don't even have a school left standing where you can hand that textbook out to students. Like it's so utterly divorced from the reality on the ground that you wonder, when is this going to actually clash?
Yeah.
Like, and let alone the fact that so many bombs have been dropped on Gaza that the unexploded ordnance itself will take decades to remove before you can even do the reconstruction.
What this just reeks of me is like imperial, agenda, right? Like imposing rule, drawing state line, all these things we supposedly.
And my guess,
are
this
against.
is some,
and it might actually even be worse because it doesn't even involve any of the people who it supposedly would rule over.
And my guess is we will see something like this.
Oh, absolutely, I agree with you. This is the most likely outcome. But the point is that in the 21st century, it's not going to last. As in the power, the amount of force it would take to enforce something like this is not. I mean, it is within the realm of possibility for the U.S. It shouldn't be. That we have no interest in doing this doesn't mean, I guess, that we wouldn't get locked into it. But it would turn into a multi-decade quagmire. The current, it would just be completely unsustainable.
Yeah, and they basically would just have to shrink the population down to, which was what they're ultimately trying to do, shrink the population down to a quote-unquote manageable size.
Sad.
I think we can, if people want to see my exchanges
You wanna play it?
with the state tomorrow, we can save it tomorrow.
Okay,
It's like,
all right.
we're running low on time. People can check out the Dropside Twitter feed.
There you
It's
go.
on
Check out the
there.
Dropside Twitter feed. It's there.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.